I'm going to teach you about prompt testing, and the good news is you don't have to know how to code to do this. Here you can see the outcome of a test. This is variation A versus variation B, and specifically I was trying to test something that would increase the word length of blog posts. Even if you ask it for quite a long blog post, it doesn't listen all the time. There's all sorts of tricks to getting it to listen. And the trick that I tried here, if you look into the data sheet, I specifically just said, make it really long or I lose my job. The reason why it works, if you look for the emotion prompting paper, is that large language models can actually understand and can be enhanced by emotional stimuli. And that's pretty interesting because AI is like a simulation of a human brain, if you think about it that way. So it does make sense that they would react in similar ways to the way that we work, right? So that's the technical explanation to why this works. All right, so what you can see here, and I'll just outline these, is that these responses are actually longer, but not consistently. In some cases, they're shorter. In this case, we actually got like a pretty short response back. In a few other cases, we've gotten below 1,000 words. The way I'm calculating word length here is I'm just counting the result of splitting the text by space. You can see that this doesn't have to be really complicated. Evals is a whole topic, right? There's a lot that you can learn about evals, and most of them are geared towards programmers who can set up like a eval framework. But in this case, you just need something simple in Google Sheets. I just need to count the number of words. All right, so we have an existing experiment and we've tested adding it in all caps, but we want to add another variation here. And that should be as simple as just creating variation C, and then we're going to run it 10 times. Just count 10 of these. There we go. So we have 10. And the hypothesis I have is that if we take this, the hypothesis I have is that if I specify a word length, then it might listen to that. Right, we'll see. And this is an experiment, right? Because we don't actually know if it's capable of following word length at this point. I'm just going to call this specify word length. And I'm going to take this existing prompt, the control, and it's important that you start from the control each time because you might be getting different results based on the different changes that you made. I'm just going to paste in the template here, get rid of these quote marks, and then I'm going to say, write an outline for a blog post. Each section should be a minimum paragraph, 2 paragraphs long, and the overall article should be more than 2,000 words. I'm going to pass that in there, and then, so this is all, this is going to be the same every time. And the actual post here, I'm just going to paste this in. So this is when the template's filled in. And if you see here, we have these in curly brackets. We have writing style, we have topic. These are variables that you need to fill in. And if we see an example here, this is where it's filled in. So you can see that we filled in the topic, productivity with time blocking, and we filled in the writing style that we want. We filled in the example post as well. So we've given it one example already, which is a post here about the Pomodoro technique, right? And then we're just going to wait for it to come back with the actual response. We need to adapt this filled in, we call it the formatted prompt as well, because that's what we're actually going to copy and paste into ChatGPT. So now we have it in here, we need to just make that change that we made to the template. We said minimum of 2 paragraphs long, and it should be more than 2,000 words. Okay, so that's the only change that we're testing here, and we're just isolating that one variable. And we can just copy and paste this down further, right? So if you're running a more advanced experiment, you might want to try multiple things. So maybe you try multiple topics, maybe you try different examples, whatever it is, you can test that. And the reason why, by the way, I'm running the same thing 10 times is you can see just how often the results vary. And this is the thing with LLMs. They don't always give you the same response back. So it's really important that you actually take a look at what's coming back and you actually run experiments like this. Okay, cool. Now we have, just to summarize, we have the specify word length. We have a hypothesis of what we think might work. We have the actual prompt template, which we're recording here for posterity. And we could use that template to fill in different topics or different writing styles, whatever it is. Then we have the formatted prompt for this run, right? And this is, each one of these rows is a run of ChatGPT. And this is exact text that we've pasted in, we will paste into ChatGPT. So it's the prompt with the variables filled in. That's the formatted prompt. And then we just need to put in here which model we're going to use. In this case, we're going to use GPT-4, which is ChatGPT Plus. And then this is where we're going to paste in the response. We can also copy this formula down, and I'm just going to drag that down there. So that's going to count the number of words. Cool. All right. So now I'm not going to use ChatGPT because ChatGPT I've found is relatively inconsistent. It's somewhat personalized to people's results. If you have custom instructions, it's going to change things, right? So I would say whenever you're templating something, you want to use the API. But obviously, I promised you wouldn't have to code here, so I'm not going to make you. But if you sign up for a developer account at OpenAI, the main thing that I use here is this playground. This is the system message. This is like the custom instructions. We're not going to play with that here. We're just going to emulate talking to ChatGPT. We have the model over here, so we can use Turbo Preview, we can use GPT-4, or whatever it is, and then you can set the temperature as well. I just leave it at 1 right now, and that's relatively balanced. If you want it to be more deterministic, so you want it to give the same result every time, you could lower it, or if you want it to be a bit more crazy or creative, you could increase it. The main thing you want to make sure is you set the maximum length here. I've set it for 4,000 because that should be enough. One token, like it's saying here, is roughly 4 characters of English text, so about 3/4 of a word. 4,000 tokens would be about 3,000 words. It should be plenty for what we need. And then don't worry about these other settings. I'm going to paste in the prompt here, and we can see, actually, let me just delete the quote marks. This is something that Google Sheets adds. But yeah, this is our formatted prompt, remember, don't paste the template in. So we have here the productivity with time blocking topic, we have the writing style, and then we have this example post of another post I've written in the past. And it's going to go off that. Okay, cool. So let's hit submit. And it's going to generate this response. And this takes a little bit of time with GPT-4. It is much faster with GPT 3.5. But the nice thing about this, by the way, is you're also not going to hit your limits, because GPT-4, you can only send 50 messages a day or in 3 hours, which is super annoying, right? And if you have this situation where you're trying to test a prompt, I need to run it 10 times, that means I can only test 5 things, and that sucks. It's better to do it through the OpenAI API playground instead. One thing I should also mention is that there is some cost to this. GPT-4 is pretty cheap, but you can see the pricing and the usage in here. I'm just going to try and open that in another tab so you can see. I only spent $3 this month, but last month I spent a fair bit, $130. Just depends on what you're doing. These API calls, so like this one I just made here is like 5 cents. So it's not a big amount. So don't worry too much about it. Cool. All right, here we go. We have response here. And I'm just going to copy. I'm not even going to read it. I'm just going to paste in here. And here we go. We only got 933 words. So it did ignore our admonition to make the word length long. You can have a couple of choices here. Here, the one you could iterate on the prompt and just say, it did so badly on the first try that I'm not even going to try it multiple times. I'm going to try something else. Or you could keep running it 10 more times and pasting these in just to see if there's some variation. I'm going to do that and then I'll restart. Okay, on the last run now, you can see that I've just been copy and pasting in here, and it's not looking good. Actually, we're getting worse results so far. Yeah, with an experiment like this, typically I'd run it a couple of times, and if it's not even close, I would stop it. But this is interesting data, right? Because here we go, we've got the last one here. If we just paste that one in, what this tells us is that it does not respect word count. It has basically completely ignored what we said here, that it should be more than 2,000 words. That is a good result when it comes to an experiment. You'd be surprised, because one, it tells us that technique doesn't work, saves us a lot of time and effort, like worrying about whether it's going to work or not. We're not going to try that one next. We're going to try a different technique. The other thing that's really helpful here is that when we see other people using this technique, we can tell them of this experiment and actually give them the data and say, look, it doesn't look like it works, but you test it. And it fosters a culture of testing within the organization. The really nice thing as well is that this is just a small scale test with you doing it in Google Sheets, but like you could pass this to a developer and say, hey, can you test this at a larger scale? Or maybe we could, if you find a result that does work, like we did with make it really long in caps, the emotion prompting, then that's something that you could validate with a larger scale test. And you could try it with lots of different topics or lots of different example blog posts or lots of different writing styles and see which of those things impacts the overall length. You could also then scale this up and do other types of evaluations. So maybe the word length isn't as good when we use one type of prompt, but maybe the quality is high. So you could have maybe outsource this, have someone read each of these blog posts and then put like a rating out of 10. The reason why it's useful to save this stuff here is that rather than just running it in ChatGPT and then you lose the output, you can never find it again because it's in your history somewhere, then you can actually give this data to someone else. You actually have some real data now. And you can use that for whatever it is you need. You can go back and review it in different ways. You can add new tests to the experiment, really whatever it is you want. That's a really powerful thing you can do here. And just on the final thing, let me just update this pivot table. Okay, so to change the range, you just select the pivot table, then you click edit here, and then if you scroll up, you'll see the range here. Right now it goes to G21. Which is just the bottom here. We want it to go all the way down to G31. So we're just going to change that. Or if you want to make this automatic, you could just say to G, and then it's going to grab everything if you want. But I'm just going to do this manually. Cool. All right, so we can see that we actually had a lower response than I'll lose my jobs in caps, but we did have a slightly higher response to the control. The way we figure that out, I just copy and pasted the formula. Actually, let me just do it here. So it would be this divided by this minus 1. So it is 7.4% better in terms of length across 10 observations. So it's only pretty small, but it did make a difference. It just didn't make as much of a difference as the all caps emotion response. You could also test other things here, so you could take away the caps and just use the emotion, or you could put the word length in caps as well if you want. You can get pretty fine-grained with this. But now you know how to do prompt testing, you can test whatever you want. So feel free to make a copy of this sheet, but also do make your own sheets or add your own stuff if you find that necessary for the purposes of your test or the type of evidence you need to be able to give to the other people on your team.